The Kuala Lumpur High Court will deliver its verdict on Datin Seri Rosmah Mansor's solar hybrid GRAFT trial on July 7th. Justice Muhammad Zaini Mazlan fixed the date this morning during the mention of the case. Rosmah is charged with soliciting a 187.5 million ringgit bribe from Jepat Holdings Managing Director Saidi Abang Samsudin between January and April 2016 through her aide Datuk Rizal Mansor. In exchange, she would help the company secure a 1.25 billion ringgit solar hybrid project from the Education Ministry. The wife of former Prime Minister Datuk Sri Najib Razak also faces two charges of receiving a total of 6.5 million ringgit at her official residence in Sri Perdana Putrajaya and also her private residence in Jalan Langgat Duta, Kuala Lumpur. Her trial concluded on February 23rd after 43 days of hearing with 23 prosecution and 2 defence witnesses, Rosmah herself and former First Lady of Malaysia Department Director Datuk Sri Siti Azizah Sheikh Abud. PETRONAS says a weakening ringgit against the US dollar generally has a positive impact on its financial results. In an emailed reply to the Edge's inquiries, PETRONAS said a weaker ringgit against the US dollar should have minimal impact on its international investments and operations, as its revenue and spending are denominated in the greenback. On the flip side, this would mean that its domestic investments and operations may experience higher operational cost. In general, PETRONAS explained, its capital allocation is split equally between international and domestic operations, encompassing investments in core and non-traditional businesses. The local note has retreated against a strengthening dollar in anticipation of US interest hikes to curb inflation and as investors seek the greenback as a haven at a time when they see downside risks to global economic growth stemming from the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, in addition to the COVID-19 outbreak in China. At time of reporting, the ringgit was hovering just above the 4.39 mark against the US currency. Top Glove Corp Executive Chairman Tan Sri Dr. Lim Wee Chai has raised his stake in the rubber glove maker after buying more shares in the company, which has seen its share price fall to its lowest in over 2 years. The counter fell to RM1.49 at the close after trading between RM1.48 and RM1.54, the lowest since its October 4th, 2019 close of RM1.49. That values the company at 12.23 billion ringgit. The stock slump comes on broader market weakness and at a time when COVID-19-driven demand for gloves is seen normalizing as global vaccination progress leads to anticipation that the outbreak can be curbed. According to Top Glove's latest shareholding change updates filed with Bursa Malaysia, Lim has raised his direct stake to 27.392% after acquiring 1.5 million shares at RM1.53 each. The filing showed he also owns an indirect stake of 8.495%. SERBA Dynamic Holdings says it has settled in full the compounds imposed by the Securities Commission against the company and 4 of its top executives. In a burst filing, the company said payment was made on Monday for the total sum of 16 million ringgit ahead of the extended deadline of May 11th, 2022. The oil and gas company, whose creditors have filed a winding-up petition against it, also emphasized that its operations are continuing as usual, with a focus on managing the creditors and its PN17 restructuring process. On April 13th, the Securities Commission compounded SERBA Dynamic, its CEO cum Group Managing Director Datuk Dr. Muhammad Abdul Karim Abdullah and 3 other top executives 3 million ringgit each for submitting a false statement involving a revenue of 6.01 billion ringgit for FY20, which was previously red-flagged by its external auditor KPMG. The other 3 individuals were Executive Director Datuk Syed Nazim Said Faizal, Group Chief Financial Officer Azhan Azmi and Vice President of Accounts and Finance Muhammad Hafiz Othman, who was also issued an additional compound of 1 million ringgit for falsifying the accounting records of one of SERBA Dynamic's subsidiaries. Shares of SERBA Dynamic rose 41.67% to 8.5 cents at the close, giving the group a market capitalization of 316.81 million ringgit. Malaysia's Armed Forces Fund Board, which is eyeing its first international public equity exposure, hopes to more than double its fixed income or bond investments to 20% of total assets, with the aim of raising its annual dividend payout to 5%. According to Chief Executive Datuk Nazim Rahman, the fund, better known by its Malay acronym LTAT, will start getting exposure to the international equity market by the third or fourth quarter of this year and have the funds managed both internally and through external fund managers. That aside, LTAT is also increasing its exposure to fixed income from the current allocation at about 8% to about 20%. He said the management of the fund for fixed income investments will also be done through both internal and external fund managers. Nazim was speaking during the MIDF Conversations event today. He said LTAT hopes to achieve and sustain its proposed annual 5% dividend payout from 2022 onwards by diversifying its investments. Last year, LTAT declared a 4.1% dividend for members after paying 3.5% in 2020, 2.5% in 2019 and 2% in 2018.